This week's episode of the Game Biz is brought to you by Netflix. For a free 30-day trial, head on over to netflix.com/GameBreakerTV. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Game Biz episode 14 for October 29th, 2013. I'm Gary Gannon, and joining me as always, Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
Doing good, Gary. How are you?
Excellent. All right, let's jump into some questions. If you guys have questions for the Game Biz about how to get into the games industry or anything about the business of games, please send them to Monty at GameBreaker.tv. And if you have video questions, record yourself on the YouTubes and send us the link because we'll play it on the show. All right, so first up this week from John. John says, my girlfriend is a game development student, and she keeps talking about procedurally generated stuff. What does that mean?
All right. So first off, John, talk to your girlfriend. I mean, it's just not a good way to go through life. Procedurally generated things in games are things that are done algorithmically, which maybe might not help you all that much. So let's say a dungeon, right? On one hand, you could map out a dungeon, you create a dungeon, you set up where the mobs are, all of that sort of thing. Or you write an algorithm that says, build hallway, and then random chance there's a room, random chance there's this, random chance there's that. You build it out that way. There's advantages to procedurally generated stuff because it's new game every time kind of thing. And so a lot of the, all of the games that are new every time, you're using procedures to do.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I have a question with this because now, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there some games in MMOs out there that are procedurally generated but don't actually utilize the randomness factor? Because I was told by our buddy, Mr. Raph Koster, that Star Wars Galaxies was all procedurally generated. Yet, that world didn't necessarily change.
No, it's more that it can be your the missions or the quests. So where do things happen? And it's not just it's not necessarily maps. It could be mobs. It could be where treasure is. Those sorts of things. I got involved in one project a few years ago where these guys had an MMO with a lot of text and they had no voiceovers. So they said, hey, there's text-to-speech technology. You guys can make voices sound different. Why don't you set it up for us and we'll give you, here's a bag full of money so that you give us procedurally generated voiceovers. Spent a ton of time on it. And at the end of the day, it didn't work. It worked, but the effort to do it was more expensive than paying a voice actor. So right now, voice actors are cheaper than what it would take to procedurally generate voiceover. All of those things, that's what happens.
So why don't we see more, especially in the MMO space? I wonder then why don't we see more of this? More procedurally generated games with more random sort of encounters. I mean, isn't that what most MMO players are looking for? Kind of this living, breathing, ever-changing world. Don't you think that they would actually want something like this?
They would, and I'm going to have to ask somebody why they don't. The only thing that sort of comes to mind is MMOs are balanced on a knife's edge. So you don't want to leave too much to chance in terms of, where the mobs are, things like that, and that might be the reason. But let me ask some people.
I'd love to know. All right, so next up, this one from Martin. Martin has a question. Says, "Why would Activision separate from Vivendi? Seems like a waste of money to me."
All right, so this is all sorts of fun. I was looking at some of the numbers up earlier. Activision, in terms of market cap, in terms of like what its stock is worth about a third of Vivendi. But there's a couple of reasons why you want to split up the company. So one, Vivendi is they own television networks, music, satellite networks. They're into telephone companies. They've got all sorts of properties like that, and their sort of net operating margin is about a third of what Activision's is. So when you're sort of mixing those two numbers together, you're actually getting a weaker return on that investment. So your stock's more valuable if you split it up. The other thing that I came across, and I looked at several articles on it, and only one of them sort of jumped out and mentioned this, is you ask yourself, where did Activision get the $8 billion? Vivendi needs it. They have 17 billion in debt, so 8 billion. Yeah, it's a start. And Activision brought in an investment group to help them with that $8 billion. Some came from cash they were holding. Some came from this new investment group that was going to own, I believe, 25% of Activision. Part of that is Tencent. So Tencent, who is quietly making their way around the world, buying, Epic, Riot, and all sorts of other places very quietly, now has a big chunk of Activision, and they would want that separate from Vivendi because they don't want to play in the other businesses. They want a straight up gameplay. They want to be exert substantial influence on it.
Would your opinion be that was actually a big reason for the push? 10 cent alone,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. It's on one hand, the CEO of Activision's reporting to somebody in Vivendi, and that can't be all that much fun. And he's explaining games to people who are, music guys. And then on the other hand, it's like, okay, we can be allied with with the biggest, game company in the world, who's got unlimited money to do stuff. Why not? It's a better deal for them, and probably better for Activision as well.
All right, next up, this one from Alex. Kind of specific questions. Why doesn't League of Legends have servers on the West Coast? Why do they have their servers in Canada?
Yeah, so League players like to whine a lot. The and that's probably going to end up with a lot of League hate. Um, there's a couple of reasons why you might only want to have your servers in one place, and one of the things is you got to remember that Riot grew up as a startup. So this wasn't, Sony Online or Activision setting up a game with a ton of money. These guys started with VC investment and built up. They sold when they had, I think it was something like 60 million players, and they're, much bigger than that. Anyway, when you're building that infrastructure, the simplest thing to do is you have one data center. So you're not dealing with two different databases. That means you're, when you do upgrades or changes, you're only hitting one infrastructure. You can sort of manage and scale that better. What happens to some companies, and I do not know if this is what happened to Riot, but what happens to some companies is it takes off, and then you're sitting there going, all right, do we not work on the game this quarter and have a whole bunch of our engineers split our servers so we have them in various places? Does latency, which is the only reason I can think.
Well, here's the other thing: is if they were to split their servers like that, you would potentially be splitting the NA community, which Riot does not want to do. Exactly. They've done this in other parts of the world. I believe in Asia, there's like, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you know, but I've heard there's something like 20 or 30 servers to log into because there's so many players, they just can't handle it. And you see in the EU, Riot's having some trouble with their servers going down a lot more. And it's because of the same thing. They have so many players, but they really don't want to split the community. So I think that might be a big reason for them.
I think that's a good chunk of it too, is let's keep everybody on one server. Again, you could bridge people across two servers, but you're pulling an engineering team and they're having to do that sort of work. So there's a lot of reasons, and it usually comes down to it started that way, and we don't want to put in the effort right now to fix it. Eventually, at some point in time, they'll make a big fix. And, things eventually, when it comes to sort of servers you're on, all right, here's the wild prediction. Give it 5-6 years, and that'll disappear. You'll move between, you won't even know you're moving between servers. You'll have a namespace that can handle it. That seems reasonable. Why in Canada? There's one reason that's possible. So Canada tends to have higher than US data center costs. The funny thing is the biggest cost in a data center these days is power. And while Canada ships a ton of power to the US, in Canada it's significantly expensive, mainly due to taxes and things like that. Sorry, bitter former Canadian. But one thing that Canada did do, and I know a number of free-to-play companies were taking advantage of it, and again, it could have been that Riot started out with this in their head and things changed, but the way Canadian accounting rules, this is such sexy stuff. I don't know why people ask these things. The way Canadian accounting rules work is you could recognize the revenue. So recognizing the revenue means if I sell something to you, like I sell you a hammer, and you give me $5, I can say today I made $5. If I sell you the service for the next 5 years for $5 to hammer nails for you, each year I can only take $1 out of that 5 and recognize it as revenue in that year. It comes down to what happens if you say stop hammering nails for me. How do your books look? Right. So Canada had better rules with revenue recognition for virtual goods. So a number of companies had set up in Canada for just those reasons. In the US, they're still struggling with some of the regulations and accounting rules around it. So that, if you think higher than average data center cost, not where their head office is located, it's probably a reasonable guess.
All right, next up from Guinea. Guinea says, I never use the Kinect with my 360. Why is Microsoft making me buy one with the Xbox One?
Yeah, well,
to spy on you when you're running around in your underwear. No.
There's easier ways to do that, but that's another story. So one of the reasons comes down to why aren't there a lot of great Kinect games? Well, if you're a game maker and you do the math, Kinect is only in so many households. If I'm going to make a game, I'm going to make a game everybody can play versus one that's just Kinect. And so, yes, things like Dance Central or that where you really need that full body stuff, they're going to be Kinect games, and they might be big enough motivations for people to buy a Kinect.
But now everybody's going to have one.
Everyone's going to have one. So now it opens the door to a whole bunch of more, let's say more casual games, more family games, more group games, which is something Microsoft would like to take a chunk away from the Wii on. It opens the door. We've talked about this before about how both Sony and Microsoft are trying to figure out how to own your, rec room dollar. So yes, they've got your game money. They like you to stream shows through it. They'd like you to do more things through their device. I mean, everything you buy these days that can plug into your TV set can stream Netflix and, Amazon and all that sort of stuff. And everybody's trying to get a piece of that action drive. So with the Kinect, one thing that they do have that, like if you have an Apple TV, the interface is cumbersome. Most things that plug in to the TV set that let you stream things, the interface, it's pretty damn mediocre at best. With the Kinect, and we saw this 2-3 years ago at CES, and usually they've got a sort of 4 or 5 year head start on where the market ends up. We saw a whole bunch of gestural controls. So TV sets, other things like that. Wave your hands and it does this, do this, and it does that.
Do you think that's going to catch on? Do you think it's really the future? Do you think it's really people are going to do that? I'm kind of skeptical.
It's going to catch on much more than voice commands. So voice commands just won't. The percentage of people who like to talk to things, it's small. It's not going to I don't think that's going to
Really?
happen.
So they've done studies like showing that people actually like to do gestures more than like you could just walk in the room and say TV on. That you'd rather
Right.
do like something with your hand because I'd rather walk in and be like
Wait.
TV on.
Yeah, but you want to be Captain Kirkman. Uh,
Oh, Minority Report.
yeah, but it's the gestures allow you to have a room with multiple people in it. They're not picking up stray conversation. You can have a number of things with gesture control that works. And so, the hope is that that's kind of neat. And so somebody in the family who does not use the Xbox, but says, oh, neat, I can do some cool TV stuff with this, with gesture controls. You go into some houses and you can't figure out which remote turns on the damn TV.
Mm-hmm. That is a
Um,
problem.
those sorts of folks, if you can hook them and say, hey, look, our control mechanism is good, then you've got a chance for them to say, wow, that's pretty good. Maybe I'll use this to play my discs on. Maybe I'll use this for streaming. And I'm going to see ads and other things, no doubt, with it. And so it's a bit of a conversion.
That
So
was my
make
next
the
question.
market bigger.
What do you think? Do you think there's an advertising play here as well? Because we do know that they want to use the Kinect to understand what you like more than they even do now. So is this
Yeah.
like a new road that they're kind of going down new uncharted territory to offer advertisers like more data?
Oh, I was CTO at a phone company 10, 15 years ago, and we just, when the internet's exploding, and a lot of the stuff we talked about around television was how do you really know what's happening when people are watching TV? So how much time are they spending on a second screen? Who's paying
You
attention?
don't believe the
Who's
Nielsen
in the room?
ratings?
Yeah, I mean, Nielsen is scrambling as hard as they can, and they're still in business because nobody's got anything better. But you don't know how many people are in the room. You have no sense of that. With the Kinect, if you're able to get to the point where you're recognizing people or gestures, the number of people making gestures, lots of interesting information. You might be able to tell the size of the people. Not that Microsoft is doing any of these things. I'm just speculating. Um, you tell the size of people, might be able to guess some ages. All that sort of stuff is data that's useful. And so they don't want to see you naked. They just want to know who you are and what you're doing. Or they don't want to see me.
Last up this weekend from Jason, another League of Legends question. They're coming out. They're coming out. So Jason says, some champions in League of Legends make no sense. Their skills don't work together and they seem to have no role. Don't they test them?
Yeah, so the simple answer is yes, they do. But why does it end up looking bad? So, to think about, it's got to be an effort to put a new champion in the league, right? So somebody has to come up with a unique concept. So what's this, champion? How they're different? They got to come up with the powers, the art, all of that sort of stuff. And then internally, there's all of the arguments over, are they overpowered? How balanced is this? Are they going to shift things? And so, I can see in some cases somebody shepherds a champion through that process and is saying that, look, players are going to use it this way. It's not going to be overpowered. And, and they test it out. Players using it that way. It makes sense. They hand it out to the general public. And most people don't play it that way. For whatever reason, some other combination strikes more people, and they start using it in a way that just isn't effective. And so you end up with this sort of thing of, we built this balanced, effective thing, but or a lot of people aren't using it the way we thought they would use it. So what do? Do we tweak it? Do we move it? Do we dump it? All of those sorts of questions come up. So that's probably more likely than what's going on, rather than people just randomly inserting champions into it.
I've actually gotten to see the wall of champions at Riot where all the crazy ideas that have not been implemented yet, like everybody has an idea up there, so the artwork's up there, and they're just like, should we go with this? There was so many of them. This is a while back, but it's pretty interesting to see. Monty Sharma, follow him on Twitter at Monster27. It's MONTSTER27. And like I said earlier, if you have a question for Monty, so you can send it to Monty@GameBreaker.tv, and we love video questions. We don't get enough of them. Please, please, please record your question. Post it up on YouTube. Keep it around a minute or so, and shoot us the link at monty@gamebreaker.tv. Always a pleasure, sir. We do the show live every Tuesday at 3 Pacific. So come on over for the live show.
You forgot what time zone you were in, Arch.
I always forget. I always screw up the days. And if you're going to GDC Next, it's called, right? Is that their proper name?
Yes, GDC Next and ADC, to trick us in thinking it's the Austin Developers Conference.
Yeah.
But it's the App Developers Conference. So the interesting thing is there'll be less MMO, which was fading in Austin anyway, a lot more mobile. So, let's see who's there.
But we'll be there. And if you're there and you see us, come on up and say hi. We'll see you next week for some more Game Biz.
See ya.
See ya.